So, what's on my mind today? Barrett-Jackson. It was here in Scottsdale, which I live in the Mesa area, so that's in the pretty close proximity of Westworld, which is where it was held. Anyway, we usually go out there every year, but fortunately we could not go out there this year, but I watched every second of it on television. So, one thing I got away from this year, the prices were higher than normal. That's the one thing I took away from this year's show. So more than likely, there's more money out there than there ever has been, apparently. But it was entertaining, and I always learn something new at Barrett-Jackson every year, because I do like cars. Now, have I ever bought a car at Barrett-Jackson? Yes, I have bought a car at Barrett-Jackson. But you may not know that my passion are Buicks, and I do like Buicks. And it's only because my uncle Betts, was a Buick man. And they always impressed me with his cars that he selected as a Buick guy, and that was a Rivieras. He had a 67 and a 72. And so one of my favorite cars of all time is a 1972 Buick Riviera. His was completely and absolutely cool. And it was one of those boat tail cars that you may or may not know of, that it looks like a Corvette in the back from the 60s. But it's a big car. It's a huge car, in fact, and it's awesome. Totally awesome looking. Some people love the style of this car. Other people hate it because it's ugly, they say. And that's what one of the guys that took over at General Motors thought. It was an ugly car, and he totally changed the body style and everything of the Riviera. But the Rivieras have always been one-off cars. They've never been a car that was like any other car in the General Motors lineup. One of the things that I did when I was out at Barrett-Jackson one year was buy a 1971 Buick Riviera. It's gold and brown, and it is gorgeous. The only thing is, you may be thinking that I have it in my garage. Nope, I have it right here. Yes, I actually bought this at Barrett-Jackson. 1/18 scale Buick Riviera. Yes, 1971 Buick Riviera. Yes, I bought this car at Barrett-Jackson. So officially, I bought a car at Barrett-Jackson. Now, it may not be a big one I can get into, but the doors do open. Oh yeah. And the hood comes up too. Well, we won't show that part, but it does. The hood does come up. So anyway, to answer the question, I bought a car at Barrett-Jackson. Yes, I bought a car at Barrett-Jackson. Was it $26,000? No, it was $26. But hey, I bought a car at Barrett-Jackson. I can actually say that. Now, I didn't buy it from the block. I bought it from a vendor, which they have hundreds of those cars every year at Barrett-Jackson. So if you can't buy a big one, you can buy a little one. They're kind of expensive though. Sometimes they can be as much or even more than any car that you would buy in a store somewhere else. Sometimes they're more. If it's a rare car, like a 63 Corvette, it could be as much as $80, $90, even $120. Or even more in some cases, depending on what the car is. So even like the cars that cross the block at Barrett-Jackson, these cars can be very expensive too. So I have bought a car at Barrett-Jackson to answer that question. And some people may think, that's crazy, you bought a little car. You didn't buy no big car. Hey, I still like the Buick Rivieras. And I like the boat tail. I just like it. I like the style of that car. That car is cool. And the interior is cool. The exterior is cool. That is one of the coolest cars General Motors ever came up with. Now, to tell you the truth, I like Buicks. And I like almost every style of Buick, from the 50s into the 60s and into the 70s, and especially into the 80s. So anyway, if you think that those cars are cool, then hey, you're with me, man. Older cars are cool. They have that style, kind of evoke a different era of cars. So that's one of the reasons why I do like Barrett-Jackson. Today's cars, they're nice, but they're not as cool looking as the cars from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And they started losing their style and their coolness in the 80s, kind of grabbed a little bit back in the 90s, and now today's cars are getting back to stylish. But there was a time in the late 90s and early 2000s where cars all looked about basically the same. It wasn't until like the mid 2000s where cars started getting their own identity again. And that's what's cool about cars back in the 50s and the 60s especially. They had identity. When you seen a car in those eras, you knew what it was and you knew who made it because it was just cool looking. So anyway, to answer the question, I did buy a car at Barrett-Jackson. Yes, checked off that box. But as most of us, we wish we could buy one of the big cars that come rolling across the block at Barrett-Jackson. Now, was there a big surprise I seen this year at Barrett-Jackson? Yes, I seen a Corvette only go for $19,000. It was on a Thursday, and I was blown away thinking, man, but it was a 70s, and it was not, the 70s don't have the prestige that the rest of the Corvettes do, but it was still a Corvette. And even though it may not have the horsepower that the Corvettes did later and earlier, there still was a Corvette, and it was a very good-looking Corvette at that too. It was a hardtop, and it was one of the Mako Shark Corvettes, but I think it was a 1976 Corvette. And somehow nobody really wanted to buy that car, and it kind of stalled at $19,000, and that was done. That was the lowest price I've seen for a Corvette all weekend. Now, there was a Buick that went across the stage, a Buick Special, it was a Roadmaster that went across the block on Thursday, I think it was, that went for $200,000. Yes, and it stayed, and that was the highest car that day. So there's still cars out there that people want to buy that are older, that are much more of a old style car, but mostly people like to get Corvettes or Thunderbirds or those kind of cars. But if you never watched Barrett-Jackson, if you've never gone to an auction, you really ought to put that on your bucket list because you can see so much at Barrett-Jackson. You can be a part of the block part because you can actually sit outside. You can actually sit outside of all where they're at, and you can sit actually in the bidders area later in the day because sometimes they want to fill the bidders area up with people. Then you may not have a bidders pass. Please don't put your hand up, but you can sit down in that area when television is still on. But a lot of people leave. Especially on Fridays and Saturdays, they want to make it look like there's more people there than there actually are. But, you know, it's still a spectacle. Fridays and Saturdays are the biggest days at Barrett-Jackson. But, you know, one of those things about Barrett-Jackson is, if you've never been there, experience if you love cars. Because when you are a car guy or a car girl, you can really just go crazy there. Because you'll see so many cars you've never seen before in your life. And you will be amazed of the different styles, different years, the way cars used to look, the way cars, just cars are cool. Cars are one of those things that a lot of people really are passionate about, and I'm one of them. I like cars. Well, I like a lot of things, but I like cars. I think cars are awesome and cool. Of course, I'm a NASCAR guy, so, you know, I like racing. I like Indy, and I also like F1. So there you go. That's just the way it is. That's what's on my mind today. And that's it for today.